Greetings and thank you for joining me. I'm sincerely grateful you've chosen to spend a few moments watching this video. If you feel compelled to subscribe, it would truly mean a lot. Now let's get started. My name is Kobe, and what I'm about to share with you is a story that forever altered the way I perceive people, especially those closest to us, the ones we think we truly know. Grief has a way of exposing the truth behind carefully maintained appearances. After 16 years of marriage, I believed I understood my wife's family. But it was only in the aftermath of her death that their real character came into sharp, painful focus. What unfolded during the legal reading of her final wishes revealed something cold and unsettling. For some individuals, the death of a loved one isn't a moment to reflect or grieve, it's a chance to measure gain. When inheritance comes into play, the illusion of family unity can vanish in an instant. Vivian and I built a life together grounded in deep love and commitment for over 16 years. She passed away at just 44 years old, the result of a lifelong autoimmune disorder she had lived with since childhood. We were always aware that this illness could eventually take her from me. But no amount of preparation made it easier to accept when the time came. From the beginning of our relationship, Vivian was transparent about her condition. Early in our time together, she confided in me about the rare chronic illness she had been diagnosed with at age 8, an aggressive disease that impacted various systems in her body and demanded constant medical attention. When we made the decision to marry, we did so with the full understanding that her health would influence much of our future. Over the years, we traveled across the country in search of the best care, consulting specialists, exploring alternative treatments, and doing everything possible to extend her life and enhance her comfort. We never found a cure, but we never stopped trying, and we never stopped facing it, side by side. The financial burden of her care was enormous. We funded numerous experimental treatments and sought out top-tier medical professionals, expenses our insurance refused to cover, but the cost was never something we hesitated to shoulder. Having children wasn't an option for us, not because we didn't want them, but because Vivian's doctors warned that pregnancy posed an unacceptable risk to her health. It was a painful decision, but one we reached together, fully aware of the consequences. Instead, we invested ourselves in shared joys. When her health allowed, we traveled, immersed ourselves in history and art, and created a home that was filled with laughter, love, and unforgettable moments. Vivian thrived as a graphic designer, working with prestigious clients while managing her workload around the demands of her health. Even with all the obstacles we faced, our marriage was rich with meaning and happiness. Vivian was an extraordinary woman, tenacious, optimistic, and unwilling to let her illness take center stage. Her resilience and warmth left a lasting impression on everyone she met. But her relationship with her parents remained a point of quiet sorrow. Her mother, Patricia, and father, Kenneth, had 2 sons as well. Over time, it became painfully clear they showed a marked preference for their boys. Vivian often felt more like a duty than a cherished daughter in their eyes. During family events and holidays, their lack of genuine interest in her well-being was evident. Even after we were married, they rarely asked how she was doing or showed concern for her condition. Their focus remained on their sons and their families, while Vivian was often overlooked. It seemed in many ways that they had mentally handed off all responsibility for her care to me and no longer viewed it as something they needed to engage with. Still, Vivian made every effort to keep the family bond intact, sending holiday greetings, remembering birthdays, and hosting dinners, though these gestures were rarely returned with the same energy or affection. As her health continued to decline in her final years, the distance between her and her parents only widened. Their visits became rare, and when they did come, they seemed uncomfortable in the face of her deteriorating condition. Rather than offer comfort, they pulled away, unwilling or perhaps unable to confront the reality of her suffering. The last 2 years were particularly difficult. Her disease progressed rapidly, requiring round-the-clock care, constant hospital stays, and an overwhelming schedule of treatments. I took on the role of her full-time caregiver, handling her medical needs, fighting for her with insurance companies, and never leaving her side during the hardest moments. As the end drew closer, our conversations turned increasingly practical. Vivian wanted everything in order. She worked meticulously to arrange her affairs, determined to ensure I would be supported after her passing. She understood how my career had taken a back seat, so I could care for her. Over time, she had built a strong financial foundation. Her design work had been well compensated, often through stock options from major companies. Together, we made smart investment decisions. She had also inherited a significant sum from her grandmother years prior, which we managed carefully and grew over time. Her death left a hole in my life nothing could fill. Even though we had tried to prepare for the inevitable, the reality was unbearable. 16 years of shared life vanished in a moment, and no amount of planning could soften that blow. Grief took hold of me. Simple daily tasks became monumental. The house we had made a home felt hollow, every room echoing with the absence of her presence. We had arranged her funeral together in advance. She wanted something understated, focused more on the beauty of her life than on mourning her death. Her family attended, but their presence felt formal and restrained. Their expressions were blank, their interactions stiff. It was clear they were there out of obligation, not out of loss. Afterward, I did my best to begin the long process of healing, but the quiet emptiness of the home we once shared was overwhelming. 2 months later, I received a call from Vivian's attorney asking me to attend the official reading of her will. Although she had spoken to me many times about her plans and intentions, the formalities had to be completed to carry out her final wishes. I arrived at the law office on the appointed day, expecting nothing more than a straightforward procedure. Vivian's parents were already seated, accompanied by her 2 brothers. The atmosphere in the room was tense and formal, though I assumed this was due to the gravity of the situation rather than any personal animosity. The attorney opened the session with the standard legal introduction, outlining the process and confirming that Vivian had been mentally competent when drafting her will. He soon transitioned into the specific terms of the document. As I had presumed, the majority of Vivian's estate had been left in my name. This encompassed our residence, her shares in several ventures, multiple investments, and her personal effects. The estate was substantial, representing not only our joint efforts over the years but also her individual achievements. But as the reading continued, I noticed a distinct change in her parents' expressions. Their neutral demeanor shifted into visible irritation, which quickly intensified into thinly veiled outrage, as it became clear how much of Vivian's assets had been entrusted to me rather than to them or her siblings. Once the key components of the will had been disclosed, Patricia broke the silence. Her voice was sharp with resentment as she insisted that her daughter's fortune should have gone to her sons. She made it clear that she believed my lack of a blood relationship with Vivian disqualified me from any legitimate claim. Vivian's father quickly added his agreement, declaring that family wealth ought to stay within the biological lineage. Their reaction was both jarring and deeply disappointing, particularly given how little they had been present in Vivian's life during her later years. Although the lawyer appeared taken aback, he remained composed and professional. He reiterated that the will had been properly executed and reflected Vivian's own clear intentions. But despite this clarification, her family's complaints persisted. Without hesitation, the lawyer reached for a second envelope that had remained unopened until that moment. He informed us that Vivian had prepared an additional document specifically addressing her family members. As he opened and read this second part of her estate plan, it became apparent that Vivian had not entirely excluded her family. She had left them modest bequests, enough to acknowledge their relationship, but far less than they had evidently expected. These gestures were reasonable, if restrained. Each of her brothers was granted a small financial gift and a few heirlooms that had once belonged to their grandmother. Her parents were allotted a slightly larger sum, along with several cherished family photographs and mementos. Rather than calming their outrage, these gestures seemed only to deepen it. Instead of responding with gratitude, they appeared insulted, furious that the lion's share of the estate had gone to me. To them, Vivian's decision felt like betrayal, almost as if something had been taken from them that was rightfully theirs. Her brothers, backing their parents' indignation, voiced similar resentment. They argued that, as her siblings, they deserved a more generous share, seemingly forgetting how strained their relationships with Vivian had become over time. The tension in the office continued to rise. Vivian's parents began leveling accusations, targeting the very foundation of my relationship with their daughter. They claimed I had manipulated her during her illness and exerted influence over her estate planning while she was in a vulnerable state. Their allegations were not only groundless, they were cruel. I had devoted 16 years to Vivian as her partner, then her wife, supporting her through the best and most difficult moments of our lives. I had set aside my own career to care for her throughout her illness. The suggestion that I had taken advantage of her was not only false, but also an affront to everything we had shared. The attorney attempted to re-establish control of the discussion. He reaffirmed the validity of the will, emphasizing that it had been drafted without coercion and met all legal requirements. Nonetheless, Vivian's parents remained unconvinced. They stormed out of the office, vowing to contest the will and reclaim what they saw as their rightful inheritance. A few weeks later, I received formal notification. Vivian's parents had filed a lawsuit to challenge the will. Their claims centered on accusations of undue influence and the assertion that the will did not accurately reflect Vivian's true intentions. The legal action was devastating. I was still in the throes of mourning my wife, and now I was being forced to defend the integrity of our life and her final decisions. It became painfully clear that I would need experienced legal counsel, not just to protect my own interests, but to uphold Vivian's last wishes. I hired a highly regarded attorney who specialized in estate litigation, someone known for effectively defending contested wills. He assured me our case was strong. Vivian's parents, he explained, would face an uphill battle, needing substantial evidence of manipulation or mental incapacity. But Vivian had remained intellectually sharp until the end. Moreover, there was ample documentation supporting her estate decisions. What followed was a drawn-out legal struggle. We endured months of depositions, discovery phases, and aggressive tactics from both legal teams. Her family pulled no punches in their attempt to dismantle the will, enlisting their own legal representation and examining every conceivable angle. During the discovery process, it became increasingly clear how insubstantial their arguments were. They failed to present any concrete evidence of undue influence, and numerous individuals testified to Vivian's mental clarity at the time her estate plans were finalized. These same witnesses confirmed that her parents had played almost no role in her care. Under oath, it became undeniable that they had distanced themselves during the period when Vivian needed support the most. My attorney carefully built our case, presenting a clear and compelling narrative. Vivian's decisions were guided by her own values, her independence, and the truth of our shared life. The evidence was overwhelming. I had been her partner, caregiver, and constant presence during her illness. In contrast, her family had remained on the sidelines, largely disconnected from the reality of her final years. After enduring a protracted legal battle, the judge ultimately handed down a decisive and favorable ruling in my favor. The court found no credible evidence to support the claims made by Vivian's parents regarding undue influence or impaired judgment. It upheld the will as valid and legally binding, confirming that Vivian's wishes had been clearly and lawfully expressed. Yet this courtroom victory came with significant consequences for her parents. Because the judge deemed their accusations unfounded and without substance, they were ordered to repay the entirety of my legal expenses. At that moment, the full impact of their miscalculated challenge began to take shape. When the total financial burden was revealed, their shock was unmistakable. I had enlisted the services of one of the region's most esteemed attorneys, and the cost of navigating such a complex and drawn-out case had become substantial. The final amount due far exceeded anything they had expected when they first chose to dispute the will. While the financial compensation was meaningful, the resolution of the case carried a deeper emotional weight. The court's verdict validated not only Vivian's documented intentions, but also the authenticity of our relationship. It also cast a harsh light on those who had claimed to love her, yet whose actions revealed a primary interest in material gain. Their attempt to redirect her estate for their own benefit had collapsed entirely. In the end, they walked away with nothing more than what had been initially designated to them, small tokens that Vivian had included despite her reservations. Worse still, they were saddled with extensive legal liabilities, the cost of which far surpassed those original bequests. This ordeal stripped away any illusions about the nature of their relationship with Vivian and highlighted the way grief can expose one's true motivations. It became clear that their connection to her was, tragically, more transactional than emotional. Looking back, I now see that Vivian likely understood her parents more clearly than I had ever imagined. Her decisions about her estate demonstrated a precise awareness of who had truly stood by her during her final years and who had not. The case also emphasized how essential thorough estate planning is. Because Vivian had taken the time to consult a seasoned attorney and prepare her will carefully, her voice prevailed even after her death. Though the process was exhausting in every sense, legal, emotional, and financial, it provided a kind of closure I hadn't expected. Being compelled to legally establish the authenticity of my bond with Vivian gave me a path to begin grieving her loss in earnest. It also allowed me to acknowledge and cherish the profound connection we had shared. I'm deeply thankful that her last wishes were upheld and that her memory remained protected from those who attempted to exploit her passing for personal advantage. The individuals who had truly cared for Vivian were the ones who stood beside her while she was alive, not those who emerged only after her death, brandishing claims of entitlement. In the end, her parents' pursuit of her estate cost them not only the legal case, but any moral authority they might have had as her family. Their conduct validated the very reasons Vivian had chosen to leave them only a minor place in her estate plans. I'll never forget the expression on her lawyer's face when he opened that second envelope. It said more than words could. It was evident that he too had understood the dynamics at play and had likely anticipated the conflict that would follow. In the end, loyalty and love carried the day, while opportunism and assumption led to failure. Vivian's estate passed to the person who had remained with her through 16 years of life together, through marriage, hardship, and illness, not to those who had seen her more as an inheritance than a human being. My memory of her remains untainted by their actions or their failed attempts to rewrite her legacy. She was a remarkable woman who endured pain with strength and grace, and whose final choices mirrored the same clarity and integrity she had lived by. Her legacy belongs with those who stood by her in truth, not merely those connected by lineage, and with that, the story finds its end.